So, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a pleasant lunch break and that you're ready for the afternoon sessions. Welcome back. My name is Guilherme Soares, and I'm from Portugal, and I work at Armis on ITS solutions. I'm also part of the DATEX II technical management group for about 3 years, and I'll be your moderator for this session today. So, as we know, DATEX has been technically evolving since its origins. However, despite all those evolutions, it's still based on the fundamental principles of the separation of technical concerns. This allows us, of course, the efficient addition of new models for some functional areas, new protocols and tools that are useful for software engineers, and new communication patterns that aim to collaboration-oriented control. This session this afternoon is composed by two parts. Firstly, we'll introduce the DATEX II technical principles and separation of concerns. And secondly, the resulting set of technical specifications and tools. For that first part, our first speaker is Ian Cornwell, representing the Highway England, UK, and is also the UK representative in the DATEX II Technical Management Group. Ian is a very experienced software engineer and specialist on ITS specifications and standards, and is with the DATEX II TMG since the turning of the millennium. Afterwards, our second presentation speaker will be Jonas Jaderberg, representing the Swedish Transport Administration, and is also the Swedish representative of the DATEX Technical Group. Jonas has a long experience with traffic information and traffic management, and is an IT architect expert which is greatly poured into the DATEX II tools and specifications. Okay, and during this presentation, I kindly invite all the attendees to ask questions via the Q&A panel session, and at the end of this session, we will have a time slot that will answer them back to you. So I kindly ask also Ian, the floor is yours. You can start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Guillermo. Yeah, I was asked to give a technical introduction. You might think that means that I'll cover the same ground as Bard and Pal did this morning, but in a way that's harder to understand. Well, hopefully not. I'm going to go into a little bit further inside the specifications, give you an understanding of the implications for projects developing with DATEX II. So, as Guillaume said, we'll cover the technical principles. I'll then spend probably the most of my time on the data content technology side, and a little bit of time on data exchange. And then we go to the schema wizard. That could be a reference to the presenter, Jonas Jaderberg, but actually, I mean it's the name of the tool. So Jonas will show you that. So yeah, it's been said already that DATEX II has evolved. There have been new models, new protocols, new communications patterns for collaboration, and the underlying methodology with separation of technical concerns, that's made it easier for us to grow DATEX II. I'll explain that a little bit more. So this is actually quite an old diagram. It was proposed 20 years ago, and today we see it's really been valuable that we adopted that, that DATEX II adopted this pattern at the outset. So it's about separating, first of all, if you're looking across the way, there's a separation between content on the left, content specifications, and on the right, data exchange protocols. So having separation of specifications there with a minimal coupling enables us to work with those things separately and change them independently, which is important. Then looking vertically at the split there, the top we have so-called platform independent or technology independent models. So models of information content and information exchange interaction. separated out from technology specific or platform specific specifications for really how do you do this stuff with concrete technologies. And again, by separating that out, that allows these things to change independently. That has proven now to be really useful. For many years, we had our platform independent model, but only one kind of technology for encoding these models, which was an XML schema. But now we have other kinds of encodings, and we see the value. It's been really easy and natural to support that evolution with this separation of concerns. Keeping the pattern of quadrants, these are some of the specifications then that the DATEX II organization has produced and led into CEN and ISO standardization. And in fact, some of them have been mentioned already earlier today. I'll spend some time first in the platform independent content quadrant. So these are the information models, the DATEX II information models. And I can go quickly through this because Paul already said how we have had the release 3.0 and then 3.1 added some more areas. It's actually an important point here to think about. Don't think about version 3.0 and version 3.1 being in any way incompatible. It's really compatibility comes through the version 3, and then each minor revision just adds more namespaces, more modules that you can work with. I'll explain more about the modularity concept later. But we've added these modules, as has already been said. And yeah, and we have a forthcoming release in the first 6 months of 2021. The exact content of that release is still subject to confirmation. It's not 100% clear whether we will be finished all those things in time for a release at the end of our current project, but there'll be a release probably with those contents. And we also made the D2 Lite release. That was a separate platform independent model. It's a cut down traffic situation model. It's actually a different model if you want to work in a really, really lightweight way and exchange traffic situation information. So this slide, I'm not going to go into the individual details much, but just to say that we're working with international standards for modeling, for information modeling, and we're using a specific tool, Enterprise Architect, to produce models that people can work with. But we're doing that with, we're sharing things using a format called XMI, which allows a degree of interoperability between modeling tools. And well, some developers won't need to look at the models. They won't be so interested in the models, and they really just want to get straight to the technology specific artifacts, like, for example, XML schemas. But for those interested in the models, I think we haven't seen today yet a single example of what does this look like. So just in case people aren't clear, this is one very small example class diagram from one of the platform independent model specifications. It's actually one from the variable message sign specification. And just to give you a feel for, we've constructed these models, and important here is they're made out of defined kinds of elements. So on the right there, for example, we have a list of packages that you see in the DATEX model, and they use a kind of element, a defined thing in the DATEX II methodology, a D2 namespace, and there are definitions for abstract and concrete classes, for attributes, for relations and inheritance and enumerations. The meaning of these kinds of elements is defined in the DATEX II methodology. And the importance of that comes then when we move from the platform independent to the platform specific, the technology specific. So we've defined a so-called UML profile. It's basically saying a UML model can be made up of these kinds of items. the arrows on the dashed arrows here, the thin dashed ones, they just show the dependencies. So we produce, the DATEX II UML models comply to this defined profile. And the importance of that is we can define a general mapping from those kinds of UML elements to specific technology, such as XML schema. So we've defined a UML to XML schema mapping. And that's just an example, but we've also defined similar paths for mapping to JSON schema, for translating to ASN.1. So those are done at a general level. And then any compliant UML model, compliant with the DATEX II UML profile, we can use the tooling, which Jonas will show you more about. We can use the tooling to generate schemas automatically. We just pretty much press a button to generate the schemas. We don't hand write schemas. So that was trying to explain how we go from platform independent to platform specific or technology specific on the content side. Before I leave content, I want to talk about some more important features on the content side. Two features which allow application developers to focus only on what they need are modularity and profiling. Modularity is important. It was introduced, I think this has been said already this morning, introduced in version 3 and has supported the growth of DATEX to cover lots of new application areas. They can be put in new modules where not every application needs every module. And this is a definite advance from the old version 2. The picture on the screen here is, so just it's showing the dependencies of namespaces. So there's 6 explicit namespaces shown there. And actually in the bottom one, each of the 4 things in the contents are themselves namespaces. So that's showing 10 namespaces, and the number of namespaces is growing with every release of DATEX II. The good thing is that if you're writing an application, working an application, you don't need to have every namespace in your scope. You just take the ones you need. So say, for example, you're just interested in road traffic data. You're not interested in variable message signs or any of the extensions. Then, yeah, you can just take that module. And of course, you have to respect the dependencies. So road traffic data, for example, is dependent on location referencing and common elements. But at least you cut down from 10 namespaces to 3 namespaces. And in your application, you only need to work with those technical artifacts. You don't have a lot of clutter that would use resources and eat time on development. You just use what you need. So that's the important feature of modularity. And it applies both at the model side and at the schema side. If you want to work with the model, you can just use model modules. If you're working at the schema level, you can just use those schemas. The second feature is profiling, and that's about selecting elements within namespaces. So say you want to use the situation module, and that diagram on the screen now is it's already a subset of quite a complicated diagram. You can see perhaps that there's a lot of optional features there. There are some optional relations, some optional attributes. Through profiling, it gives you a way to easily select only the elements you need. So say, for example, in your application, if you were to strip out all these optional things and you only need those elements, yeah, the profiling that I hope Jonas or later sessions will be able to show you a little bit, gives you an easy way to do that. When you come to work with the technical artifacts, you only have the things on the right, and that makes development much easier. The last feature on the content side is the feature of extensibility, yet preserving a degree of interoperability. This is actually, I think this is slightly less important than it used to be, given the power of modularity, but it's still a useful feature. I'll explain a little bit in just one slide. So we've idea that there are different levels of compatibility of DATEX II models. If you are using the published models and schemas that we make available, or a profiled subset of those, but as long as you're adding nothing of your own in your application, then your publications, the data you exchange, that will be interoperable with existing receivers of data that implement the DATEX II specifications. So for example, if you're working with XML, your XML will validate and be understood by existing receivers if you stick to that. And that's called level A compatibility. If, however, you're still using the published models or a profiled subset, but you're adding your own items that nobody's ever seen before because you've got special needs for your application, if you do that in a way that follows certain rules that we have defined, certain ways of expressing the model elements for the additions, then actually your publications will still be interoperable with other compliant receivers. The XML, for example, will still validate. Those existing receivers won't know the exact meaning of the items you have added that are special to you, but those items won't break. They'll say, oh yeah, this is valid DATEX and I can understand it all. This part here is an extension and I'm not going to look inside that, but it doesn't break. And that's level B compatibility. And you can even, of course, make your own model. If you still follow the DATEX II modeling methodology, then you have a very limited degree of interoperability with generic tools, which also understand the methodology. That's called level C compatibility. But I think an important point there is that by following the methodology, even for a so-called level C model, there's a chance that your model you've done maybe for a new namespace could be adopted into future DATEX II specifications. And in the next major version, it could be seen as part of the model that against which level A compatibility is judged. And that's already happening. So people have created models, DATEX II compliant models, compliant with the methodology, but their own publications, level C, new namespaces, and they're being adopted by the DATEX II organization and to be published as part of our model in future versions. So there's an advantage of following the DATEX II modeling methodology. Okay, that was all I'm going to say about content. Some briefer notes now on Exchange, starting in the platform independent quadrant. Yeah, what we did was we started off by defining a big set of features, Exchange features that you would see in an Exchange protocol. For example, subscription is an Exchange feature. Then we defined the highest level, what we've called business scenarios. So for example, data delivery is the basic scenario of getting some data from a publisher to a receiver. Whereas the other scenario we've defined, collaborative ITS services, that's a richer scenario where you have to invoke a service and get some feedback on that service. So that scenario is more suited to achieving traffic control, not just data publication, but control and collaboration across parties, for example, for traffic management. So the final item in the platform independent model are the Exchange patterns. And basically a pattern is, we say, to realize this scenario, we're going to choose this selection subset of Exchange features. So each pattern selects some features, and the reason for there being different patterns is each one has a different selection of features. There are 4 patterns have been defined for data delivery, and for collaborative ITS services, we have 2. We have a simple one and one that's aware of session properties, data exchange session properties. So what's really in interaction model? the important normative part is what are the operations or the methods that happen in communication between a client and a supplier. What's that interface? What's that API in a platform independent way? And that's what the models specify. Moving from there to the platform specific, finally, we've defined two sets of platform specific exchange specifications. At the top, we have web services and XML. So for people who want to use web services and XML, there is one pretty simple WSDL file for each exchange pattern. And there you see the operations realized as web services, and they use the DATEX II XML schemas. So you see a very thin and simple exchange data model, which has a container that includes then the content, the data content from the content side, from the DATEX II content UML models. And at the bottom, we also have alternative platform-specific items, the D2 Lite OpenAPI. So OpenAPI is a technology for specifying simple HTTP services, and we've published that, and it includes, on the content side, it includes the JSON schema material, and in the case of D2 Lite, that's actually the situation light model generated as JSON schema and included in the OpenAPI specification. So I'm going to stop there because I want to leave enough time for Jonas to tell you more about the tooling.
Thank you, Ian. So I'm going to... So I'm going to talk to you about the tools we have in DATEX II, and mostly about the web-based tool. In the old way, and what we think now is more for the advanced user, you normally start in Enterprise Architect, where you can do UML modeling and mainly do extensions in DATEX II. And then you can export to XMI. Then you took that XMI file and import into the Windows tool, where you can do profiling and export to data dictionaries and validation of the model. And then in the end, you can do generate a schema in XML schema, JSON schema, and ASN.1. What we think now would be the normal way for a normal user, which just need to generate a profile. They will start in the web-based tool. There you will find predefined models, models prepared for the web-based tool. And you also would find profiles, and you can profile and you can validate your model and also load your own XMI if you have done it in Enterprise Architect. And you will see here that new features are coming up in the web-based tool and not in the Windows tool. So we currently have more features in the web tool, and that is what we think would be for the future as well. But you can still do, and you should do, use Enterprise Architect to do UML modeling, especially doing extensions. And then you can from export to XMI, and of course you can then load your own XMI into the web-based tool. So the result is more or less the same, but this is more modern. It would work on all platforms and so on. And the web-based tool, then the main goal with it is to create the schema for your profile that you can use in your services. You found this on the datex2.eu website, and the direct link is webtool-datex2.eu/wizard. And now I'm going to give you a live demonstration of this. So this is how it looks. it's worked like a wizard, so it has 7 steps. Many of the steps are optional. So if you just click next all the way, you will get more or less the schemas that are published at the website. There are also help here that you can select on each step if you like to understand what you actually should do there. At the first step, you have to select the source, the model that you're going to start from. So here we have prepared models for you, so you don't have to go into Enterprise Architect and export to XMI. So you find now the latest version 3.1, the published ones, and then you also have a full one with also include parking and so on. And on this pane, you can upload your own XMI file. So if you have produced one in Enterprise Architect, here is where you should load it. We take the default setting and go for next. The second step, you could either do nothing, or you can select to upload your own selection. Like if you have running this wizard once before and saved your selection file, this is where you can load that profile again and do changes. But we go for next here as well. In step 3, which also is optional, here we have those recommended profiles that has been talked about earlier this day. So we have RRPs, recommended reference profiles, and RSP, recommended service profiles. And I won't go into details now about it they are, but they are profiles prepared and will help you select things from the model, and also prevent you from deselecting things that should have been there if you should comply to, for example, in this case, action C. So I selected 2: animal, people, obstacle, debris on the road, and unprotected accident area. So you can choose more than one. And then I click next. And then I can, at a high level, tell which kind of referencing systems I like to use in my service. So say, for example, that we're going to use alertc method 4 for points. And we like to use alertc linear method 4 for linear. I just click those. This is just a way of moving up the location referencing part from the next step and make it more easier to find, you could say. Then we click next. So in the 5th step, here we're going to combine everything we have selected from the earlier steps. The source, if you had a selection file, if you have selected profiles, and if you have done location profiling. And merge all this into a view of all that. Let's hope it comes now. Takes sometimes longer than it used to be. Now it comes. So now we will see a tree based on our selection. And we see different colors, and different are grayed, for example. Those that are grayed, you cannot deselect, because then you will break the compatibility to DATEX II, the model that it's based on. But I can, for example, click those that are black, that I like to include in my service. And you also see the blue ones. Those are the things that are, you could say, protected or governed by the reference profiles. So if I, for example, deselect safety related message, I will get a warning saying that this is governed by profiles. Are you sure you like to remove this? In this case, I will say, no, I don't do it, but I could have said yes and removed it. If I would go down here in location referencing, you will see that those that I selected in step 4 are here selected. So it's rather further down, you could say that this is, we have to decide about the location referencing method. And that's why we moved it up to make it easier. So we can see alert theme method for point. And on linear, we have our selection here. Yeah. So when you're happy with the profiling, you click next and come to step 6. And here we can choose and do some options. If you just like an XML schema, you just click next, but you can also here change to JSON, JSON.none if you like. You can also include definitions, comments on schema. And you can save your selection file. And you can export a data dictionary to CSV files if you like. So we do that. And then we click next. What will happen now is the schema is generated on the server, and a resulting zip file will be downloaded on your client. And the log file of this is displayed. And we did get the file, but you didn't see it because it was on my other screen. But we get a zip file here that is, this is the content. And as you see, we got the schema. For some reason, it's level C, and I shouldn't have been, but anyway. And we will see the log file here. And you have the selection file. And you also have a CSV files containing the data dictionary. So that's a simple way to create a profile. And the last step is just click finish and it restarts. So I think that's it.